Welcome to A Slice with Dice, a podcast exploring the ideas, pressures, and possibilities shaping how we learn, lead, and grow. I'm Corey Alderdice. For over 20 years, my work has lived at the intersection of gifted education, leadership development, and school culture, supporting students as they find their strengths, educators as they stretch their thinking, and schools as they build pathways that expand opportunity. Ready to dive in? Here's this week's Slice. We live in the age of optimization. Young men are told explicitly and implicitly that they now need to max something, and that is with two X's, by the way. Looks max, money max, status max. There's always a lever to pull, a metric to improve, or a surface to refine. Sharpen the jawline, lower the body fat, upgrade the wardrobe, curate the image. And through this lens, masculinity becomes geometry, angles, lighting, symmetry. And yet, somewhere in the background of all that modern performance stands a very different image of manhood. One with a wool sweater, a fishing rod, and a glass of something brown, and an hour that would concern your physician. And to that effect, Ernest Hemingway still lingers in the cultural imagination. Not optimized, but weathered. As I've been thinking about this lately, partially influenced by the work and commentary of Scott Galloway on what he calls the crisis among young men, I've also been thinking as a father, as the dad of a teenage son who is trying in real time to figure out what it means to be a man in a world that seems deeply unsure of what that even means. At the same time, my leisure reading has taken me back to high school. Freshman year, The Old Man and the Sea. Sophomore year, A Farewell to Arms. When I first read those books, I read them as assignments. Now I'm reading them as artifacts, as cultural blueprints of the past. And revisiting A Farewell to Arms has been particularly striking. Frederick Henry, the novel's protagonist, is not a caricature of masculinity. He's something much more complicated. He drinks heavily, he performs bravery, he drifts emotionally. He falls in love, he deserts the war, he endures loss, he walks alone at the end. He is brave in action and evasive in intimacy, capable under fire but less articulate under emotional strain. He is in many ways a portrait of partial masculinity. And that feels incredibly contemporary. Because if you're a teenage boy today, you are not short on scripts. You're drowning in them. You can scroll your way through thousands of definitions of what a man should be. Hyper-dominant, hyper-wealthy, hyper-disciplined, hyper-detached, or alternatively, endlessly vulnerable, endlessly expressive, endlessly self-analyzing. Young men are grappling with both clavicular and the performative male at the same time. Pick a lane, choose a tribe, optimize accordingly. But that polarization is exhausting. And I think that's where this playful idea of looksmaxxing versus Hemingway maxing becomes something more than parody. Looksmaxxing says control the surface. Hemingway maxing says harden the interior. One optimizes visibility, the other mythologizes endurance. Looksmaxxing asks, how do I appear? Hemingway maxing asks, how much can I withstand? But here's where and what rereading Hemingway reveals, especially as a father watching adolescence unfold in his own home. Endurance without integration can become isolation. Strength without articulation can become distance. And self-control without emotional literacy can become self-medication. Hemingway himself is a cautionary tale as much as he is a cultural icon. The stoicism is compelling, the competence is admirable, the courage under pressure is real. But the biography also contains alcoholism, fractured relationships, deep depression, and eventually tragedy and suicide. Now, that doesn't invalidate the virtues, but it very much complicates them. And maybe that's the lesson adolescent boys need most right now. Not a new extreme, but a synthesis. Because there are things in that older masculine code worth preserving. Courage matters. Responsibility matters. The ability to endure discomfort without collapsing matters. The willingness to act decisively when action is required, that matters. But so does the ability to name fear. So does the capacity for tenderness. So does relational steadiness. So does asking for help before the crisis. You see, the challenge for teenage boys today is not that masculinity exists. It's that it feels either under attack or oversimplified, either suspect or exaggerated. And adolescence is already disorienting enough. You're negotiating your body, your social status, your emerging identity, your future. You're trying to determine where you fit in the hierarchy of peers and expectations. And add to that the ambient cultural anxiety about gender, and it's no surprise that young men feel unmoored. When Galloway talks about young men falling behind in education, struggling with purpose, retreating into isolation, he's pointing at something structural. But beneath the data is something developmental. Boys are searching for meaning. And meaning is rarely found in the mirror. And so I think that's where literature still matters. Because when you read A Farewell to Arms carefully, not romantically, not nostalgically, you can see a man who can face artillery but struggles with attachment. A man who can desert an army but cannot fully escape his own emotional evasions. He's strong, and he is incomplete. That incompleteness is instructive. Because masculinity isn't a finished product you download at 14, 16, 18, 28, whatever. It's something you construct and reconstruct over time. Ideally with mentors, with feedback, with community, and with humility. And as a father, that reframes the task. It's not my job to hand my son a script titled How to Be a Man. It's not to swing the pendulum toward hardness or toward softness. It's not to reject tradition wholesale nor romanticize it uncritically. It's to help him integrate, to test himself physically and also practice emotional vocabulary, to take responsibility and also admit when he's wrong, to pursue competence and also cultivate connection, to endure and also to reflect. And that integration is more important than any maxing trend. It doesn't sell supplements. It doesn't trend on short-form video. It doesn't come with a tidy algorithm. But it produces something more stable. Because a jawline won't anchor you, and neither will a war story. But knowing who you are without an audience, well, that might. If there's a crisis among young men, it may not be solved by louder advice or more extreme archetypes. It may be solved in more natural spaces, around dinner tables, in classrooms, in locker rooms, in honest conversations where strength and sensitivity aren't enemies but partners. Hemingway's prose was famously sparse. He left things unsaid, but as readers and as parents, we don't have to. We can say clearly courage and compassion belong in the same person. Endurance and empathy are not mutually exclusive. Strength that isolates is brittle, but strength that connects is durable. That's not looksmaxxing. It's not Hemingway maxing. It's something slower, more deliberate, and perhaps something more hopeful.
A Slice with Dice is a production of Alderdice. Thanks for making time to reflect with me. If you're finding value in these episodes, I hope you'll subscribe and help spread the word. Until next time, lead boldly, listen closely, and keep pushing forward. I'll see you then.